Hello and welcome to Baking Q&A with myself, Faye. This is a new weekly episode where I'll be discussing all questions related to baking. These are questions that are either sent into us or questions I see throughout different baking groups. I'd like to introduce Robert. Rob.
Hello. Hi, I'm in the hot seat. I'll be the one asking the questions so we can hear what Faye has to say about the questions that are commonly asked on these topics.
Yes.
So shall we?
Let's begin.
Shall we get stuck into it? Some of them will be a bit more simple. Some of them will be a bit more involved. But like I say, let's see where we get to with the answers. So start with maybe a simple one, but it's one that's asked a lot. Is people ask, how do I know my sponge cake is ready?
So there are a few different ways of determining if your sponge is ready. One, you've got to use a skewer or a knife and pierce it in the center of the cake. Keep it there for a few seconds. Don't just put it in and take it out. Keep it in and then remove it, and you will see if there is obviously a lot of wet batter. If there are a couple of crumbs, the likelihood is that it is ready. If it's very wet, you've got to continue baking. Another way to check is by tapping the center of the sponge. If the sponge springs back, the likelihood is that it is also ready. But it doesn't mean that's 100%. I'm able to tell it's ready, but that's also because I've got, quite a few years of experience. But maybe the best way is to try both ways.
When you say put the knife or skewer in, and you said a few seconds, what's a good guideline for people to know how long to leave it in there for?
Keep it about 10 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. This one's on frosting and decor and that sort of thing. This again is something we see a lot, is people want to write on cakes.
Yeah. So
what's your advice to people who say, what's the best way to write on cakes? How do I go about it? How do I get better at it?
the best way to go about it is practice. You've got to do this repeatedly. You've got to do it every day. I personally don't write on cakes because I've just not practiced enough. When I was in culinary school, I was told by my pastry chef, if you want to write on cakes, you've got to practice like an hour a day or more if you really want to be good at it. So if that's something you want to do, practice every day and you will get better. You will see.
There's no shortcut on this. There's no secret to it. It is just a matter of practice.
You've got to have a steady hand. Obviously, if you are trying to write with chocolate, it's very fluid, so it's more difficult. If you are going to try to write with buttercream, you can't have it too thick because if you press too hard, probably the whole piping bag will explode. So you have to have a good consistency with buttercream. And as practice, a great way to practice is print out letters or happy birthday or congratulations, and with a clear perspex tray, place that over the printed letters and words and write over. And then so you practice. And then you could also practice, you have print out a circle with happy birthday inside, so that is proportioned in size to the circumference of the cake. So then you also then become confident in writing on an 8-inch cake, on a 6-inch cake, for example.
Are there any, if people don't feel they're ready to write on cakes, are there any alternatives that they could use to put lettering, put wording on cakes? Yes. Because the last thing you want to do is make a beautiful cake, have it finished, then write on it and ruin it.
There is nothing worse than a beautiful cake with writing that obviously you can tell it's not professional, that somebody doesn't know what they're doing. Unfortunately, suddenly that cake doesn't look great anymore. So you're better off buying what they call tappets. These are little letters. You can find loads of cutters nowadays with all different fonts. And you roll out sugar paste, put a bit of Tylo powder or CMC. So it's a bit, it dries faster. And then you put them on the cake board or you put them directly onto the cake. And then they look professional. They look pretty, and yeah, that's the best way.
Okay. This is a creativity question, especially for people starting out who are sort of finding their feet a little bit. They see lots of different styles of cakes done in lots of different ways, and they want to build their own style. How does somebody go about that, rather than just, obviously when you start, you sort of maybe copy what other people do a little bit, but you want to try and develop your own style of cake? What's the best way to go about it?
So my personal opinion is create a mood board. And in this mood board, collect, let's say, 10, 20, 30 cakes, doesn't matter how many, as many as you want, of the cakes that the style of cake that you're attracted to, that you like. And then look at all these different cakes and see what is it that you like, and maybe take this little different details from these different cakes. And by doing that, then you're suddenly creating your own look, because you've not gone and copied one cake. So it's just little details. And then the more you start to do cakes, that will come naturally and you will develop your own style. And it's something that is very important, that you have your own style, because if you're selling your cakes, this is your uniqueness. And then people will come to you because they can't find the style of cake anywhere else, for example. So it is important. But definitely look at other people's work, and I borrow or try and experiment. It's only something that will come to you again by doing it more.
And there's so much information on social media and pictures and
Overwhelming.
But there's so much there, and there's such massive variety of styles from people all over the world doing different things, that there's a lot of inspiration.
Yes, you're never short of inspiration.
Okay. Next question. Storage of cakes, particularly we're talking sponges here.
Mm-hmm.
I think probably this comes out of a lot of people who may have home baking businesses, and they might have a larger order to get ready on one day, and they're thinking, well, how am I going to go about that? I've only got a certain amount of time. What's a good way for people to prepare for that and go about making these things and storing them so that they're ready on the day?
Right. So let's bust a myth first. The freezer is your best friend when you're baking. So anybody says, oh no, cakes that are put in the freezer aren't great. Sorry, big BS there. So what you do is bake your cakes, bake them how many you have, like in volume and mass, how many you need. You bake, you cool them, you freeze them. They will stay fresh in your freezer for up to 2 months. So yes, freeze your cakes. And then when it's time to frost them, take them out. You can frost directly onto a frozen cake, or you can defrost them in the fridge. Either or, it doesn't matter.
What are some good sort of practices to follow when you're freezing things?
So make sure they are airtight. So you either, with cling film, you wrap them tightly, you put them into airtight containers. Even if they're in an airtight container, I would actually cling that. If you are going to keep them in there, let's say for a month, the longer periods. If you're putting them in for a week or so, you have no problem.
And presumably freeze them as soon after they've been baked?
Yes. Yeah. Immediately out, they come out, they cool, and you bake. Because when you leave a cake out exposed to air, it starts deteriorating, meaning it starts drying. So the faster you work, the better, the longer the freshness of the cake.
Another sponge-related question. Maybe talking about slightly larger sponges now, so maybe 8-10-inch cakes, maybe bigger than that, is making sure that the center of the sponge is cooked without the outside being dry or burnt.
Okay.
How do people guard against that?
They're different. Okay, let me start. If you're baking in what we call sandwich tins, those are like the layer tins, the short ones, like a 2-inch versus like a 3 or a 4-inch tin. If you're baking in the larger tins, they will dry out or they will go darker. It doesn't mean your sponge is going to dry out, but that's because you've got to bake them for a longer time. And the same can happen with the shallower cake tins. One of the best tricks I discovered about 10, 15 years ago are cake strips. And these are, you buy them online for cake or from cake shops. You saturate them in water.
That piece of cloth.
Yeah, they're fabric. They're fabric cloths. You saturate them with water and you wrap them around your cake tin. And you don't end up with that dark, crusty layer.
So, you know what that does is it moderates the temperature around the outside.
Yeah.
Of the
So and also what it does do, your cakes bake flat, so you don't have that domed situation.
That's actually another question We should come across a lot.
Yeah.
You preventing sponges from doming and cracking.
So these cake strips, or whatever they're called, cake strips, they do two things. They don't dry out your cake, then they bake your cake evenly. So if you're doing layer cakes, you don't end up having to waste by cutting off the sponge. You don't have to trim the side if it's overbaked. So yeah, worth the investment. They're not expensive. Go and buy them.
Whilst we're on that topic, domed sponges, yes, you can use cake strips to try and guard against that. Are there any other sort of reasons or things that people should look out for to try and prevent that?
There are so many different reasons. It could be that your recipe has too much or too little sugar. It could be that there is actually too much batter in that particular size cake tin. It could be that you poured your cake batter into the tin and you maybe didn't tap it so that the batter would flatten out, that it would spread. It could be that the recipe is not a great recipe, that the ratios of it could be also a butter issue. It could be a liquid issue. It's
So there's no sort of one simple answer to that.
Yeah, no, there isn't. So you've got to test. So try the cake strips first. If that works, that means it's a good recipe, and that was the issue. Maybe you just needed the cake strips. Try using less batter, and that's another way of testing. Try another recipe. Let's say you're making a chocolate cake, and try a different chocolate cake recipe with the exact same amount and see what happens. So these things it's a bit of trial and error, and that's how you learn.
Okay.
And keep notes.
Yes. So that one more question.
Sorry, there is one. Temperature of your oven. It could be too hot. So what happens is it bakes on the outside, it domes, and then you end up with also a raw cake on the inside. So yeah, there are so many different variables that can cause.
We'll have one more question to bring this first little episode to a close. Another decoration one. Mm-hmm. Again, a question we've come across a few times in the last week or two is about decorating with chocolate. Do I need to temper chocolate? Is that something that's needed if I'm putting a piece of chocolate decor? Yes, chocolate decor, yeah.
If you are going to use chocolate, I would say definitely temper, because when you temper chocolate, that decor won't melt, especially if the weather's quite warm. Also, when you temper chocolate, you end up with a really nice shine with your work.
Those who aren't so familiar with what tempering chocolate is,
right?
Not necessarily go through the process, but just summarize what it actually means.
So what you do is you have to use couverture chocolates. You melt it. Dark chocolate, for example, you can melt up until 50 degrees. Then you've got to reduce the temperature, and then you've got to and then warm it up again. And what you're doing is you're not actually tempering the chocolate, you're tempering the cocoa butter in the chocolate. That's what we temper in chocolate to get that snip. So yes, if you want to do chocolate work, chocolate decor, I would say learn how to temper.
Yes.
That's
because otherwise your decoration is going to be a bit vulnerable.
Yes, it melts. Melts.
Okay.
Or bend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there we are.
So if you have any questions that you'd like to send in to me, either drop your message below, or you could also email me at hello@fayeponquist.com. My website is in the profile as well, so all information is there. And we will answer any questions that are sent through.
You say you'll answer them, I'll ask them.
Rob will collate them, and I'll answer them. Thank you very much, and I hope you'll come and join us again.
Thank you.
Bye.